Hi, everybody. So my name's Tom. I'm one of the TAs. Rajat is one of the other TAs. So we're going to be talking today about Amazon Web Services. This is basically just a once-over of what Amazon Web Services is, how to get a machine up and running on the platform, and then how to go from there. So I'm just curious, how many people have ever used Amazon Web Services or a cloud compute platform like that before? A couple people. Okay. How many people have just heard the term before? And then just how many people have no clue what I'm talking about? Okay. So Amazon Web Services is basically a cloud computing platform. So you use it to sort of buy a machine that you can use on the internet, or rent a machine technically. And there have been a bunch of different platforms that have sprung up over the past couple of years. Amazon Web Services is currently the one that's at the top. Hello. And there are a bunch of others. So DigitalOcean, IBM Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud. There are a bunch of them, but we're going to be talking about AWS since that's the most important one sort of in the field right now. Obviously things change, but this is where things are at right now. So there are a couple of things that AWS offers. The first thing that you guys may have heard of already is S3, which is their storage platform. And then the other one is EC2, which is their compute platform. EC2 is the one that you guys are going to be interacting with the most. But S3 is something that you're probably going to come across as well if you're like doing space. So EC2 you can think of as, for the purposes of deep learning, you're going to be training your models on EC2. But if you have any kind of heavy data constraints or lots of data that you need to use, you're going to be storing that information on S3. So there are a bunch of other ones as we get further into recitation today. We're going to see them a little bit, but we're not really going to be discussing them in detail. Just know that these are the two that you really need to care about. So getting into EC2, there are a couple of different machine types that you need to be aware of in terms of the actual types of machines that you can buy. There are general purpose machines. Sorry. There's the T tier, and then there's the M tier, and they all kind of have their own different pluses and minuses. The T tier is your sort of, you just need a basic machine to run like a website or something like that. Then you're going to be using T2. Or T or a T2 tier. But if you're trying to run a database or something that needs a lot of storage attached to it, you're going to want to use an M tier machine. Next, there's the compute tier, which is kind of the C tier, C for compute. And then, so C2 is, if you need to do scientific computing or anything that needs a lot of compute attached to it, multiplayer gaming are the things that, multiplayer gaming servers and scientific computing are the two things that Amazon sort of advertises at this tier, like these machines are capable of. And then C4 and C3 are sort of hopped up versions of those original C tier machines. So if you need to do the same thing as a C2, but a lot faster and with a lot more memory, then you can just hop it up to a C4 or C3. And then next, there's the GPU optimized machines. P3 and P2 are all machine learning training machines, and then G3 is, they advertise it for fluid dynamics and graphics rendering, things like video production. If you need to do any sort of heavy parallel task, that's kind of what it's for. So we're going to kind of touch on all of these. We're mainly going to be focusing on the T tier, and I believe as the class progresses, you guys may want to use a P machine for your models, or you can make your decisions depending on your projects. It's kind of entirely up to you. So attached to all of this, there are machine sizes. So you can have nano, micro, medium, large, and then X large, and then 16X large. And these get attached to the name. So you can have a T2 nano, or you can have a P3 X large. And the X and the size basically determines, how much memory is attached to the machine, how much storage is attached to it. So you can kind of mix and match these two, depending on what your task may be. Yeah. So this is kind of a spread of things that you can get on Amazon Web Services. On the sort of minimal end of the spectrum, you've got a T2 Nano, which is a single CPU and half a gigabyte of RAM. So very basic machine. A couple of years ago, it may have been good, but this is kind of just basic machine. Then as things progress along, you can get an M4 large, These are just some examples that we've pulled out. Again, you can mix and match as you need. But an M4 large has 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM, and then you can push it all the way up to a P2 16X large, which has 64 CPUs, 16 GPUs, and just crazy stats. So these things are all available, but obviously there's a cost difference between the two and how much you use them. So the question then becomes, you rent one of these machines, you purchase time on, let's say, a P2X large. How do you get your data actually onto the machine, or how do you know what you're going to be putting on it in terms of software or operating system or anything like that? And the way that works is through Amazon machine instances. They're referred to as AMIs, and basically it's just a flash of an operating system or some additional memory that you can transfer from storage on AWS on just sort of your personal end. Amazon stores machine instances for you apart from any machine, so that's kind of how you can keep track of those. But you can create an image of a machine, or you can use images that are already sort of out there in the wild. So you don't have to necessarily install all of the crazy software packages that you need to get your machine up and running. So if you need a version of TensorFlow that is deprecated, or you just don't want to go through the steps of installing it yourself, you can search for an AMI that already has that version installed. Just flash it onto whatever machine you're working on, and then you should be good to go. So it makes things a lot easier. I've had a project where I spent 2-3 days trying to get libraries to work, and then I found an AMI that solved it in 15 minutes. So take a check if you need to take time to check and see if there's an AMI that does what you're looking for. But that's kind of the general approach. When we go and set up a machine.
So where does one look for?
So great question. So by the way, I should clarify. I should mention, if anybody has any questions or anything, just shout them out. So for finding an AMI, there are 2 places you can find them. The first is in your EC2 sort of homepage. If you have them stored there attached to your account, then you can find them there listed. Other than that, there's a whole marketplace marketplace because you can pay for some of them. But when you're setting up a machine for the first time, there's a specific page that says, here's where you want to choose your AMI to be put on this machine. So sometimes there are free ones. So there's a free deep learning AMI that we're going to be looking at later today in this recitation. But there are a bunch of but there are a bunch of others that you can pay for as well. The reasons why you'd want to pay for them is maybe it's very specific software that you're not going to be able to find anywhere. So if you've got, like I mentioned, a very deprecated version of TensorFlow, the people who maintain that AMI might be hoarding it a little bit because they know people need it, and they're kind of the only ones who've been willing to set it up. So take a look. Sometimes it's worth paying, sometimes it isn't. I'm not sure if your credits will transfer to AMIs. I believe it's only for compute time. But yeah, something to think about.
So if it's not going to transfer to AMIs, how to install an AMI?
So installing an AMI is done automatically through AWS when you set up the machine. So you select we're going to go through this process later, but when you're first selecting what you want to have put on the machine in terms of your micros or your T2s, you can also select the software, and then when you press launch instance, it'll be sort of done for you. Yeah. So now Rajat's going to talk about setting up a basic machine. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Tom. So just to add on to what Tom just talked about, you can think of an AM as kind of a template that you can just copy into your own instance, and that's one way of thinking about it. So yesterday we asked everyone on PR to create their AWS accounts. If you haven't done so already, please do it right now. Is there anyone in the room who has not created their account yet? Should I just continue? Okay, cool. Good. So,
I haven't actually got a confirmation from Amazon yet.
well, I mean, it typically doesn't take more than a few hours to get a confirmation. So
it sent me a note that I'd hear back.
I would try logging in and seeing if it just works. It usually doesn't take very long. So you can just, so once you've created your account, you can just go to the console and try to create so you can't really read very well in this slide, but when you open your console, there's going to be this portion which says services, and you can go there and select this is going to say EC2. So
Say console, what is the name?
when you go on aws.amazon.com, yeah, that's going to open this console, and you're going to be able to see the services that you have access to. And then EC2 is one of those, and you're going to, is there anyone who doesn't have access to this? Tom, do you want to? Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so when you click on an EC2 machine, typically none of you, I assume none of you has started off their own instance yet, so you're going to see 0 running instances for now. And this is your console for all your AWS management. You're going to be able to see all your instances, your volumes, the different key pairs that you have used so far. We're going to come to that later. And it's just a snapshot of your usage, and you're going to be able to start, stop, and control instances from here. So this is a screenshot of what we had, just for an example, to show you that if you have an instance, it's going to show up like this when you click on instances. And you're going to have a list of all your instances and their categories and the usage and current status. So just to create your own instance, you're going to see a button called Launch Instance when you go on instances. So you, is there anyone who doesn't see it? Okay, Tom, do you want to? So they don't have the Launch Instance option.
Why do we want to be in Oregon?
So the AMI that we are using is based in the Oregon region. If you're not in Oregon, it's not gonna. I think it's not going to be able to find it. It's not really needed, but I believe that for the student credits, you have to be in Oregon region. That being said, I have availed my credits in another region and it just worked. But Oregon is kind of the default that you should follow.
Just to jump in, the other thing is that a lot of the heavier duty machines in terms of the P2 and P3 instances are sometimes only available in Oregon. Sometimes, depending on usage, they'll be available in other regions, but Oregon you can pretty consistently bet on them being available.
Yeah, just for the folks in Doha and Kigali, Tom just pointed out that some machines are only available in the Oregon region, so you might want to go there if you're getting into any errors. So, yeah. So once you click on Launch Instance, so it starts as a series of steps. You can just pick an AMI. You may choose to not pick an AMI and have a blank Linux to start off with, but it's just a lot easier, and there are a lot of community AMIs that have all the things pre-installed, and you can just create a copy and start with all the libraries in place. So we suggest you use this AMI. It's AMI-F1 E7 3689 in case someone can't read it. So this is a standard deep learning AMI which contains most of the stuff that we're going to use in assignments and stuff in this course. Everyone with me? Anyone needs more time? Okay. To repeat, the AMI code with which you can search is AMI-F1 E7 3689. Is that fine? Okay.
I see deep learning AMIs, but not one with content. I don't know if it matters specifically.
Could you say that again?
I see deep learning AMIs, but not one with content, not that exact one.
You can just pick one for now. I mean, this is what we use as a. I mean, this should come up with the search string, but you can just pick whichever works for now, and that's fine. Anyone needs more time? Are we good? Is this something you're stuck with? Make sure your region is US Oregon. US Oregon West. So this is Ohio. And if you set it to Oregon West, then you should be able to search for these things.
Do you know why this is coming up?
Oh, it seems that your account is not approved yet. So
I need to wait.
yeah, it's typically it just takes a few hours, but Anyone needs more time? All good? Okay. Okay, moving on. So once you go there, the next, so right now you write the machine itself and the libraries associated that you're going to use. You can obviously add things later, but it's just easier if you pick the correct or the most appropriate AMI to begin with. So once you have that, the next thing you have to do is choose the kind of machine that you're going to be working with. So for the purpose of this recitation, I recommend you go for a T2.micro or a T2.nano. T2.micro is I believe it's free tier eligible for students. So I think you have like 50 hours of free usage every month or something. So you can use this to install things, see everything's working, upload your code if you need. If you need to, it's just easier to start off with, and you don't have to pay anything to begin with this. If you start off with a P2 instance directly, you're going to be blowing all your credits away directly. So just select the instance, in this case T2 Micro, and go to the next page. Everyone with me? Anyone had any issues? No? Okay, so I mean, if you want to toy with the exact details, you can do that, but it's just a standard setup is fine, so you don't need to configure the instance details, and you can just go for the next screen. And so for storage, you need to specify how much you're going to need. So this is just a small recitation, so we're just going to choose 8 GB of SSD storage right now. But yeah, question. So so someone reported an error earlier this morning that if you go on with 8 GB, the AMI tries to, it seems the AMI has changed since we probably used it, so it requires larger space now. So in case you're running that, you could just try allocating 50 GB here. So you should still be within the free usage here at 50 GB, so you're fine.
Actually, it actually requires 50 GB, which is outside the storage.
So the free storage here is some, I think it's some X GB hours. So with 50 GBs, you get some 10 hours free or something like that. So you should be fine for the recitation. But yeah, we tried to reduce it to the minimum possible thing, but it just seems that the AMI has changed since then. So everyone with me? Anyone needs more time? No? All good? So yeah, I mean, you can add tags for your own convenience, but that's not really needed, and you can just go for next. And so far you have selected your machine type, you have allocated some space to it. Now you want to set up how you're going to configure how you're going to connect to it. So by default, I think the IPython notebook will, the port needed for the IPython notebook is not open. So you have to make a rule for that, and a TCP rule for the port 8888, so that you can use the IPython notebook from your desktops. So once you have the machine up and running, the IPython notebook is running on your AWS instance. You can use your desktop browser to connect to it, and that's just a lot more easier to work with. And you don't need to, but if you don't need to right now, but you can also add other rules here if you want to. So this is all you need to do to start a machine. Just a quick recap: you chose the type of software, the libraries that you're going to use. You provisioned some compute resources by choosing the type of CPU. You gave it some memory by choosing the volumes, and now you figured out how you set up the connection rules. So you can just review and launch if you need be. So this worked for everyone. Anyone who got stuck so far? All good? Good.
So folks, don't be shy, because we are just going to flow on. If you have problems, you must stop, you must ask questions. The homeworks and quizzes will just keep piling your way. So we're not going to come back to anything we want to.
So for the custom TCP, the options have to be like the same as in the slides.
Well, yeah, we tested it with the things that are there in the slides.
Okay.
So we know that works.
Sorry.
Yeah, so for the people who are watching the stream, the question whether we should just stick to the rules that are mentioned in the slide. So as I said, we tested those and they worked for us, and I recommend you just follow that for now. So yeah, this is the final review page. Make sure you're happy with everything and then select launch, and that's it. So when you press launch, you're gonna get this screen which talks about a key pair. So the way you SSH onto an AWS instance is using a key pair. You don't really have a password that you can use to SSH. So this key pair is a .pem file which contains your identity to log onto the server, and you just have to point your SSH command to this file whenever you're connecting it. And make sure to keep this key safe. This is the only time you're going to get to download this key. Once you lose this key, AWS will not be able to give you a new one even if they want to, and you should just make sure it's safe and protected, and just keep it. And once you launch an instance with the specific key pair, if you do lose your key, you will not be able to reconnect. You will have to terminate, and you're going to lose everything that was on that instance. So just make sure you have it safe. So yep, that was.
Will a new session be given a new key pair?
So a key pair is static for. So you choose a key pair on this screen when you're launching an instance. So the question was, do you need a new key pair for every launch? The key pair is static statically assigned to each instance at this point in the launch. As soon as you choose this, the instance is now associated with that key pair, and that remains constant till you terminate that instance, or you change this by launching a new instance. You can have multiple key pairs. Each time you can choose to use your existing key pair or create a new one if you want to. So keep in mind that each instance is linked to one key pair, and you can't do anything after that. After it is launched, it's fixed. So that was the basic set. Do we have a question?
Setting up the after that, when you move on, my security groups were not like the ones that you showed in the slide, so I had like 3 things over there.
Mhm.
You had just one credential plate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so one should be 0.0.0.0, and the other one's like colon, period, slash, 0. That's fine.
Yeah. So the question.
Yeah, the other one's the normal SSH.
Yeah, the question was that when you add the TCP, according to the slides, you're going to see 3 entries in your SSH connections table, and that's perfectly fine. Like that's okay. So.
Do I have to click long after save the key?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. One more question.
I tried to launch it, but it didn't work, so I tried to make it to 50, but then I'm getting an error that it's not
Yeah.
able to work.
Let me just hand this over to Tom, and I'll take the question. Yeah.
It says web database all these AMI.
Gotcha. Okay, can you go back to the...
Yeah.
It should be like 50 GB for 1 or 2 hours. Should be covered in this.
So like even
The
if
warning
it's
is
there,
just to
it's fine.
notify that if you leave it on, you're
Whatever
gonna,
I will be paying
yeah,
attention.
it's gonna
Okay,
cross.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Try it again and
He's got this.
Now,
Yeah.
It says you have an error when you try to run with 50 GB or 8 GB. So the warning that you're getting that it's not free tier eligible is because at 50, so student accounts have access to some, I forget the exact number, but I believe it's like 200 GB hours of free usage every month. So if you launch a 50 GB instance for 1 hour, you are at 50 GB hours, so which is within the student tier limit. I think the warning comes up because if it's not free tier